The IACDE 3D Summit team just released the assignments for the upcoming summit, and the subject is French haute couture of the 50s and 60s. There are a number of different assignments, and some of them are beginner level and some of them are more advanced. And I figured that I would have fun doing as many of the assignments as I can. And instead of posting tutorials necessarily about how I did them, I'm just going to post sped up walkthroughs, at least at this point. This project took me just over an hour to do, so I've sped it up twice the speed so you could breeze through it in about 30 minutes. If there's anything specific about it that you look at and go, oh, I'm not sure how that worked or how that was done, and you would like a more in-depth look at any of it, let me know, and I'll post regular speed videos. I'm also not going to talk through the whole thing just because I've got a bit of a sore throat and I don't want to natter for half an hour. So there's just a couple of key moments that I'll interject and maybe comment about what I'm doing at that point in the video. So again, if there's any clarity that you want or more details, let me know. Post a question in the comments and a timestamp. Say, hey, at minute 26, you're doing something and I'm confused. And I'll try to get to that. In the meantime, just sit back, grab coffee, and enjoy. So I did want to do a little bit of fitting work before I continued. And one thing I neglected to do and should have done before I started cutting apart my pieces was that once I'd had the fit down, I should have either made a copy right away to hold on to or done some of the pieces that I was going to need later on, like facings. But I didn't think of it and I just started chopping. And so that made things a little tricky later. So little tip, fit first, get the basic block right, make a copy. One thing that I absolutely love about Style 3D is that if you've got a decent NVIDIA GPU, you can work at incredibly small particle distances and so get really good results as you're working. Here I've just set it down to 10. I often set it right down to 5 right at the beginning, and I'm still able to work and it doesn't bog down. If I were in Clo and I set it to 5 and then I try to do pattern changes or move the pose, it just absolutely kills performance. But it's because Style 3D is built on the CUDA core architecture, it's super, super, super fast. And so you can work at these small particle distances and get reality, because I hate in Clo when you're working at 20, you do all your work and it looks great, and then you bring it down to that fine resolution, and all of a sudden there's problems all over the place that you have to go fix. And then you have to go back to 20 to go fix the problems. And it's just a drag when you can just work at a normal particle distance and see the reality of what you're fitting. Another thing I like to do is put the cloth into a translucent view so I can see the body underneath. I'm not trying to get completely to the body in this case because it's a shift dress. It's not form fitting, but I still want to make sure that I'm sitting close enough to the body in key points like the bust and the hips. So I'm going to continue my chopping of pieces here. And when I was when I was adding those internal lines, I should have used extend to the edge because I had to go continually move the pieces. And that was just a dumb thing I was doing, forgetting to do. Otherwise, you can't cut the piece. The line that you want to cut on has to really extend to the edge. Another thing about this project is that I've only got, you may have noticed I have a little reference image in the lower left-hand corner. That's a dress that I had seen at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. There was an exhibit on haute couture in 1996 that I went to see, and I have a copy of the catalog, and that dress is in it. But you can now download the catalog for free from the Metropolitan Museum of Art's website. So that's kind of cool. So that's where that photo came from. But I only had the front. So I'm here, I'm looking at the reference image and cutting my pieces. But then when I went to make the back, I had to make it up myself. Right now I'm looking for a jersey fabric in the Style 3D library. I typically don't like presets in general, but they've got some really good ones, especially when you get into some complicated things like laces and fur and fuzzy things. And you can also learn a few things about how to create a fabric just by looking at the presets. So I do encourage you to do that. So now I have my white, and then I'm going to copy it and then create a yellow and create a red and a blue and a black. And so all the physics are the same. The normal maps are the same. I'm just changing the colors. I could have used the color picker. In this case, I just eyeballed it. But if you've got a reference photo like the one in the corner, I could use that color picker in sort of the mid left of that dialog box to just go click on the image. But it's okay. They were easy colors. So it wasn't hard to do manually. Now I'm going to start chopping up the back. So I'm going to draw in some of my internal lines as I need them to make my piecing. As I mentioned earlier, it would have been smart to make facings before I started doing this, because when you end up with all these little bits and pieces, then you've got some gluing to do. So learn from my mistake. My neckline facing pieces were pretty easy because the main pieces were still together. But because I had cut my pieces apart, I now had to copy some of those and then start gluing them back together and doing some more cutting and pasting. Um, so I'm going to cut these apart, then stick these together so that I've got a piece that's the right dimension so I can make a facing for the armhole. The back was a little bit more complicated because I had more piecing in the back. Right now I'm doing the front. And then the facings for the hem, because it was that yellow piece, there's also a function within Style 3D called, if you right click on a piece, you can say generate lining inside or outside. It's like close layer clone under function. So it's really useful. Clo tends to put an emphasis on using double-sided pieces and just faking it, but in Style 3D, you really get more of the physics and you get it just looks better rather than using double-sided pieces and faking it, because you'll see the thickness of those facings underneath and you'll see the thickness of that lining. So it's just the physics in general and the accuracy of Style 3D's renderings I find a lot better than clothes. And clothes are really, really, really good, so that's saying something. The Summit team posted a photo of 3 people wearing versions of the Mondrian dress as part of the inspiration files for the assignment. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to kind of reproduce that photo. And in it, there's a picture frame on the wall with one of Mondrian's paintings. And there's also a bench upon which one of the models is seated and there's another one standing on it. So I went to Adobe Stock, and people may be familiar with the stock photo service or illustrations, but they also have 3D models. So I went to go find a frame, and here I'm browsing frames, and that one was actually free to license. I have a stock account, so if the assets aren't free, I can still download them and use them. But in that case, the asset was free, and they're pretty good quality assets, and they're well mapped. So I was able to bring it into Style 3D and then go grab a Mondrian inspired image, also from Adobe Stock, and go and update the base color or diffuse map that was included with it, so that I could sort of project the Mondrian painting onto the frame. So here I'm browsing the benches, looking for a bench that looks similar. I found one that's really a picnic bench with a smaller bench that I had to turn it around and scale it a little bit and remove the base color because it's a white bench in the photo. In this case, they put a texture in it, but it was okay because I was just going for white. I just get rid of the texture and it looked okay. So you'll see it coming up, and well, first I got to unzip them and unpack them, and then bring them into Style 3D. And there's always a bit of fiddling around that you have to do with units. It's never quite consistent, unfortunately, and so sometimes you import it and then you've got to scale it, or you've got to import it 4 times to get the units right. This one wasn't too tricky. It did require a little bit of messing around. So back into Style 3D, I'm going to first import a scene that resembles the scene in the photo the most. There was sort of a modeled wall, so I'll go get one. Yeah. And add, not open, otherwise you lose all your work. And give it a sec. And there we have, so I've got a wall, I've got a floor, I've got some lights, and now I'll start adding my 3D models. And now's a good time to stop talking too. So rather than just going and grabbing an image off the web, which you could do, but the ethics are questionable, I went back to Adobe Stock to find a Mondrian inspired image that I could legally download and use. So I'm just going to find one that looks like it works and download it. And the texture maps for the frame were a little curious because normally something like this you would spread it out more, but they split it up, so you see where did it go? So when I just throw the image on the frame, it covered the frame itself as well as the image portion of it, and I didn't like that. So I said, nope, I'm gonna have to do this properly and go back to the texture file that came with it and alter it. See, if I change it all black, changes the whole thing. So it doesn't work. I can't just be lazy at this. So let's go back and we find there's the diffuse or the base color image. I'm going to have to open that up in Photoshop. So let's go get Photoshop. So here's the map, and it's a little bizarre, and I'm guessing that they use this and they extend this on the four corners of the frame. So my instinct tells me to just drop the Mondrian image into that white portion, because that's what appears white on the image, and I'm just going to scale it out. And cross my fingers and hope that works. So I could just save and overwrite the image, but just in case I got it wrong, I'm going to save it as a different file name, but put it in the same folder just to find it easier. And now when I drop that texture map in, it actually worked. It was easy. I thought I was going to have to do a lot more work than that, but I was lucky. And you notice that I deleted the map for the bench, so it's, instead of it being brown and worn, it's white like it is in the original photo. So we're just about coming to the end of this portion of it. I didn't make a video of adding the other two because it just would unnecessarily make this so much longer. But you kind of get the idea of what I did, and hopefully give you some ideas about how to make your own project for the 3D Summit. So at this point, I just start rendering out my first test image. It's always good to render a test image before you go too far, just to make sure that there's no weird details that pop up. I often get stuff, especially with subsurface scatter, with skin. Sometimes you get well into the render and then you notice that there's something weird going on with the eyebrows or something. So before I add the other two models, I'm just going to run a test, see what I like, and then make some adjustments and then continue. So I hope you got something out of this one, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one, which should be L'Élégante, which I believe was inspired by Coco Chanel. So until the next one.